New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
This is What's Up and Why, bringing you the bright side of life, one fun moment at a time. Brought to you by New Thought Media Network and Thai Media Productions. Give a set of applause emojis in the chat for your co-hosts, Rev KC Taylor and Be Lovely.
Clap for us, clap for us.
Yes.
We are back for another wonderful week of What's Up and Why. I am feeling vibrant, happy, hopeful. How you be today, Rev KC Taylor?
You know what? I'm Rev KC Taylor. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm not gonna lie. I had about 3 hours of sleep last night for no reason. I've been doing my own Making Peace with Your Inner Shit Talker program. That's a 90-day program, and I recommend moving through it with 90 days of sobriety. And to be honest, I have not moved through it in 90 days fully free of weed and alcohol. I did it without alcohol. And this time I was like, it's time for me to take a step back from the weed. Like, I need to take my own recommendation. And so what that has meant, I'm maybe like 20 some days into being weed free, and my body's not happy. I'm not sleeping well. That's what it is. So I trust and know that as much weed as I smoke, that this is the right decision for me, despite my discomfort, despite my lack of sleep. And it really helps me to stay motivated to continue to abstain, knowing that this is a recommendation for my own program. So the least I could do is try it. That's where I am. How you
right? Because how can other people, follow the program if you can't follow it? But kudos to you. I will say, like, that period where your body is like, you're weaning off of something that you've been using for a while. It's very, very uncomfortable, because when I went through that period, like when I had really cut back on drinking alcohol, drinking caffeine. And then when I was trying to cut back on smoking marijuana too, my body was like, we are not happy. Where's where's our happy juice? Where's our happy potion? And then, you're just in this space where you really have to sit with your emotions, sit with your thoughts and your feelings, and figure out, okay, this is the feeling. I'm going to allow myself to feel it. I'm going to process it. I'm going to work through it. And then once you get through that feeling of uncomfortableness, that something happens, something shifts, where it's like, okay, I can do this. It's a little bit better than what I was feeling a few days before.
That's what I heard. I'm not there yet, but that's what I heard. So I am staying focused, and I've been actually spending a lot of time at the bar. Like, when I walk in the bar, they got my sparkling water with lime just the way I like handed to me as I walk in. So it feels so good to me that I get to really serve by example of showing up at the bar being completely sober. The patio is 420 friendly. My bar, Alibis, is 420 friendly. And so for me to show up and have my water and have a good time and shutting the bar down, it's been really nice. And I'm still having fun despite the fact that my body is not happy with me. And it's cool. We're going to get through it.
Well, I'm glad that you're at that space where you're taking it with stride, and you're not taking it out on people, because I've known a few people when they were going through that withdrawal process. It's difficult, and we all deal with it in different ways and stuff. There's some people where the withdrawal process is really bad and they start to lash out on other people. And I was actually having a conversation with a friend the other day about, on the days where I wake up on the wrong side of the bed, I don't want to put that type of energy out into the world. So on those days, I choose to stay to myself. I'm like, you know what? This is going to be a self-care day. I'm going to journal. I'm going to try to meditate. I'm going to go out into nature. I'm going to try to get back to my equilibrium, because I don't want to spew out, these nasty feelings that I'm feeling. I want to deal with them, release them into the atmosphere, and then come back to, my friends, my loved ones, in a happy space.
Yeah, I'm not going to front. I chose to give up weed like 4 years ago when I needed a job, and I didn't want a drug test to be a reason why I didn't get something. And I was a straight raging jerk at that time. And I ended up working at the homeless shelter, CSU Youth Services, the shelter where I still serve, and they will not drug test. They will never drug test. So I was like, bet. Started smoking that very next day, but I made that decision not for me. It was for this external reason. So that really changed the game. The fact that I've made this decision for myself in this moment, and was very intentional about the date and planning and prepping for it. That's helped mitigate treating people with respect. It was definitely iffy those first 2 weeks. Not for us not recording last week, for our studio to have suddenly disappeared. Let me tell you, Spirit has fully been looking out for me. There have been all kinds of things, like this last Sunday was a Sunday. It was 420 Easter at that. And I had somebody else who was in charge of doing the whole thing. I got to sit back and run the camera. And I was like, this is exactly what I needed today. My spiritual center had a healing circle that I didn't run and got to participate in. So it was basically, like I said, Spirit has lined me up. I go to yoga every day. I went to yoga before I came here. So,
Nice.
starting my day with meditation and relaxation. I go to the easy yoga classes. I'm not pushing myself yet. I'm gonna work my way up to that.
You're not doing power yoga.
I'm not. I'm just working on getting in the habit, because you do it every day. I'm not trying to do power yoga every day,
Yeah.
So I'm just getting my body used to it and situated. And so far, so good. The discomfort has made it. I've having my social settings and being comfortable, having given up alcohol before, I've already used to it, comfortable with it. And so it's just been a lot easier for me to be at the bar with my sparkling water and my lime, living my best life.
I want to say I'm glad that we live in a time where there are great options for Look,
I get being a pothole. I absolutely was a pothole too, which is why I am taking a step back, get my whole tendencies in line. Thank you, Wayne.
I definitely became one when I came out to visit you in LA my very first time when I was going through my breakup, which reasonably so, definitely a reason to smoke a lot of pot. But every time I think about that, I think about that time when we was sitting on the couch watching Insecure, and then it hit me so hard, and I just screamed and grabbed your hand, and we just you was like, okay, so I guess we're just doing this now. I'm like, yeah, because I'm not trying to float off into oblivion.
That was literally what you said. As high as you were, I'm glad you remember the scene so clearly.
But I do like the feeling like whenever I do use marijuana, that it helps me to unlock another a deeper side of my creativity. I've been using this new workbook called the Artist's Way, or the Creative's Way. And the writer, she talks about how our adulthood separates us from that childlike wonder that allowed us, to be curious and to dig into, our wants, our desires, and, our creative side. So something that she has suggested is like when you first wake up in the morning, just have a little notepad and just get all your thoughts out. Like, it doesn't have to be anything like very thought out or spontaneous. Just like, oh, I'm not looking forward to this. I'm not looking forward to that, because that way you're dumping out all that mental mush that just, culminated in your mind, from sleeping to waking up. So you can get all that negative stuff out of your mind and go into the world with a clean slate, so that you can, tap into your creative side and be like, okay, what is it that I want to create? What is it that I want to see? What is it that I want to experience? And you're not having, these negative nagging thoughts that's been lingering, clouding that. And
So
that's really changed, and helped me out a lot, especially with my creative writing.
I am so glad you brought it up, because Julia Cameron's The Artist Way is literally what inspired how the format for making peace with your inner shit talker. It's 90 days because The Artist Way was 3 months. And that concept of morning pages, I did The Artist Way before I moved to Oklahoma. And
I'm glad you know what I'm talking about.
Yep, it's super familiar. And honestly, like, I was with you when I wrote Making Peace with Your Inner Shit Talker. We were on a cruise together, and we shared a room, and I was like,
you were holed up in that room the whole week. You were holed up. You only came out to eat, maybe walk the Lido deck like one time, but then you was holed up in that room, Hey, Addison. Thank you. We love you, girl.
I sure was, and while I was there, so maybe my consciousness was seeking some Julia Cameron, because when I wrote the first draft, and the 90-day program wasn't in it. As I finished the first draft in the first couple of days, I was like, people need some more guidance. They need some direction, and then I really decided to break it down in that 90-day period. And one of my inspirations, because one of the things Julia Cameron says is that those morning pages, like you said, they're supposed to be like first thing in the morning for all of these reasons. But I find that like my life is not the same as Julia Cameron's life. So her recommendation may not be the right recommendation for me. Just like I'm recommending sobriety, I don't mandate it. I'm not like saying for this program to be effective, this is what you have to do. And I really saw the value of giving like space and creative freedom, of it not necessarily needing to be right in the morning, letting your intuition lead when the right and perfect time was. And so for me, the Making Peace with Your Inner Shit Talker program is designed to let your intuition lead and learn how to develop that strong relationship with your intuition, as opposed to having these hard and fast rules of, to do this program correctly, it's do the work at this time. Julia Cameron also speaks to the morning pages being 3 pages. So I did it the way that she recommended it the first time around, and then I've been playing with it, doing it my own way, and applying those same principles to the way that I move through the 90-day program. So I love that you just happen to come across this book on your own. I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and that work, like I just love what I am seeing in myself when it comes to my creativity and my writing, because there's just so much that's going on in the world. We talked about this in the past, like how writing and art is the way how I'm able to like vocalize what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. And I just feel like I'm able to really like tap into like that childlike curiosity and that wonder and that joy by getting all of that mush out in the morning notes, by doing my once a week artist date with myself. Like I just went to the Hirshhorn Museum in DC this week because this new exhibit just opened up called Love Queen. It's by this artist from Richmond, Virginia. It's his first time doing an exhibition on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. But it was just beautiful artwork, beautiful storytelling. And then just like going through the museum and seeing all the other exhibits, it just felt like I was just pouring into my cup. I was feeling so inspired. And I'm like, okay, I can take this inspiration with me and, you know, create something on my own that can possibly inspire somebody else along the way.
Those artist dates are everything. And I'm glad that you brought that up in particular, because as we talked about before the show, as we were identifying, what is this title going to be? You said, this land is your land, this land is my land. And that experience of being at that art show is a representation of the fact that literally all of us are Americans, that we're in this place. You know, Woody Guthrie wrote that song, "This land is your land, this land is my land," to really remind us that we are all in this together, that no one of us is no more or less American than another just based on our identities alone. And in keeping with that, I'd love to give reverence to the AIM movement, the American Indian movement out of the 1970s, late 60s, 1970s, that when you and I connected on offline, you talked about how you hadn't heard of it. And I'm going to be honest, I hadn't heard of it either. I bought this book, God is Red, from the bookstore. I was at a bookstore. This way. Thank you.
Yep, there we can see it.
Yes, there we go. So this book was the 50th anniversary edition. So I didn't know this book from 50 years ago, but I live in Oklahoma, and I've been doing my best to learn more about Indigenous culture. I always had tried, but it's a little easier to do here. You know, I get an opportunity to connect with more Native people. There's more Native art around, and in this book, I learned about this man, Leonard Peltier, who had been caught up in this firefight in this protest that they had going on. And I didn't recognize just how much Natives were targeted by police. And, you know, we have the Black Lives Matter movement, but the indigenous people have never really been included in that, despite the fact that they've experienced persecution. They were here first and have been experiencing persecution since colonizers arrived on day one. And even though our our focus is bringing you the bright side of life, one fun moment at a time. For me, having fun is learning about the fact that these Native civil rights movements have existed, that we didn't learn about them in school. I'm gonna say real quick, I read this other book. Is it behind me? I don't know. I think it is actually behind me, but I'm not gonna grab it. It's too high. I'm doing a book study with my mom, FYI. Would keep you posted on that. And
I thought I was supposed to be part of a book study that we.
You sure were. And yep, this is a totally different thing, because the books you sent me, I couldn't even. It didn't even.
Okay,
work.
Well, never mind. I won't hold that against y'all. It's not any.
That's what it was. So this book it's called Original Sins, and it's about how the school system is designed to socialize Black children to see themselves as second-class citizens, socializes all children to erase Native voices, and socializes white children to be complicit in the system. And I did a book study with my mom on Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro, and this is kind of like the 2025 version, but it has a whole lot more context about specific deliberate choices that our founding fathers made in designing the education system that has created the life that we are living today. And so I want to give reverence to all of the indigenous people that have continued to fight back and protest and choose to do the best they can to be visible and recognize that this land was absolutely the indigenous people's land, and that as we educate ourselves, as we participate in our artist dates and do our morning pages, we have an opportunity to identify all of these biases that we were socialized into, heal them, and move forward and serve by example. That's how I like to see it.
Thank you for giving reverence for him. When you first told me that story, like, I was very, very surprised because I'd never heard about that before. I'm very big into history, but the fact that that was never talked about in school, it was never something that was, talked about even in the mainstream media. It made me very curious about, what is the other part of history that we're not learning about. I have recently read this book by Rebecca Nargle called By the Fire We Carry. She talks about the history of indigenous people, more specifically the Muskogee tribe in Oklahoma. And yeah, I didn't even know, like, Oklahoma, like the Midwest, had like a very, significant Native population, but obviously that's because they was forced to move out there. But in her book, she really talks about how like the Native people, like the fact that the land in America is becoming like really bad, like the soil is bad, is because cotton, the plant, makes the land very dry. And that's why Native peoples did not grow cotton. They grew corn because corn would give back into the earth. It would help the earth heal. It would help the soil be more fertile, but cotton destroyed it. That was something I didn't know. And there was actually like Supreme Court rulings in back when Andrew Jackson was president that protected Native peoples from being moved out of Georgia. But townspeople who didn't want to listen to the law still forced the indigenous people out. So I definitely implore people, like, books have a whole lot of information, like the book that you recommended, and then By the Fire We Carry by Rebecca Nargle. I would definitely recommend that to anybody, because I just feel like if you're living in America, you should know, the history of the land that you are in, because, when you know history, you're not forced to repeat it.
I am so glad that you brought that up. For those of you who are not book people, there is a Netflix movie called Kiss the Ground that speaks to what you said about the soil and the challenges that we're experiencing now. And there's another book called Braiding Sweetgrass that I love. This book is the one that inspired me to be a vegan, even though it's not about veganism at all. It was just, it invited me to be conscious and aware of where my food sources come from, and to be aware of the life that gave its life from my plate. And once I was aware of it, I was like, well, let me do it a little bit less. And then it turned out to never, and that just is what it is. But this book spoke to how indigenous people understood that the proper way to grow crops was growing certain crops together. Like there's this famous trio called the Three Sisters, which is beans, corn, and squash. And they recognize that when you plant them all together, they all sustain one another and they also sustain the soil. So I noticed, like, I watched this movie Interstellar that was like, the planet is dying. We need to get in a rocket and find another planet that's livable, instead of figuring out that indigenous people have learned and identified how we can plant crops in a way that we can feed ourselves and sustain the soil. It doesn't need to be that we destroy this planet, get on a rocket, and go somewhere else. That if we listened to indigenous and traditional wisdom and apply what indigenous people knew for centuries, that we could really turn this country's soil around. And Kiss the Ground really does speak to that Netflix documentary, for those of you who are not book people.
It's so ironic that you bring that up, like how there's so much that we can learn from indigenous people about, about the way of the earth and how everything works and stuff. Because I recently just saw Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan's new movie, Sinners. And I'm not going to give any spoilers, but there's a scene where indigenous people are approaching this white family, and it's basically like they had more knowledge about what was going on. It's a vampire movie, basically. They had a lot of knowledge about the vampire that they was facing, and the indigenous people was trying to tell them, we can help you. And the white people was like, no, we can do this on our own. And then the indigenous people was like, okay, we're gone. And people online have been talking about how the indigenous people, they just completely left, and everybody who stayed got by the vampires. So you just talking about, like, how there's a lot to learn. I like how Ryan Coogler included that in the movie, included the fact that something I didn't know. The Chinese population was very, very prominent in helping the Black community to be able to have access to food and goods, because they were the only ones that would open up, corner stores and stores in Black communities. And that's something I never knew, but it kind of now everything clicks, because you're familiar with my grandma Esther on my father's side.
I have.
Her second husband.
Yeah.
I think he's of Asian descent. And I used to always think, how did she find this Asian man in the middle of country Mississippi? But then watching Ryan Coogler's movie and seeing how, the Asian community was very prominent in the South, specifically in Mississippi, that really connected a lot of that. So I like when, my media can also teach me stuff about history.
Mm-hmm. You right. We are all in this together. This land is your land. This land is my land.
So speaking of that, we're going to go into our next segment called Do Better Blues. A piece of media that taught me something very profound recently, the Milli Vanilli documentary. So if you're not familiar with Milli Vanilli, they're this duo, this male singing group duo, singing, I'm going to put in quotes. They were from Germany in the the late 1980s when they came out. Fab and Rob, they were originally background dancers. They were very, very poor. Rob was he was adopted. He dealt with a lot of racism in Germany, because he was half white, half Black. And so he dealt with a lot of mental anguish, being exiled and stuff, because the children wasn't really accepting of him in Germany. And Fab was from France, and then he moved to Germany. They were both really poor, and they really wanted to become famous. And they came across this producer named Frank Farian. Farian, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but I'm not going to give him any respect on his. Oh, he died. I did not realize he died. Okay, so.
You still don't have to put respect on his name. It's all right.
I'll let you put respect on Frank's name. So Frank presented them with the proposition that he could package them up and make them superstars. So they signed a contract. They were in their early 20s. They was 21. They really didn't have any, knowledge. They didn't have any legal counsel, because these were poor kids from the ghetto who had a dream of becoming famous. And in the documentary, Frank, his girlfriend, who also ran the business with him, she was talking about how the boys, they really couldn't sing because of their accents was really thick. So her and Frank came up with the idea that they was going to have the guys front and lip sync. So Frank paid a Black rapper and a Black singer to do the vocals. He paid the singer $12,000 and told him to be quiet about it. And when Fab and Rob came to the studio, they were under the impression that they was going to be singing the song. And Frank was like, no. You guys are going to lip sync. And there was an argument, but then Frank was like, look, you signed the contract. You're not going to put anything out unless it's this lip sync song. And so they put it out. They didn't think it was going to be anything. It was just to put it out to get them on their start. It ended up being a hit around the world. What was it? Ooh,
Blame
ooh.
it on the rain.
No, that's the second one.
Okay,
the
the first
Girl,
one.
You Know It's True.
Okay.
But Blame It on the Rain, when I heard that, I was like, oh, this is a really good song. I never knew it was them, though, growing up as a kid. But growing up, I was always under the impression that Milli Vanilli was like, they was these treacherous singers who tricked the music industry. They were scheming and conniving because that's how it was presented. But in this documentary, Fab is telling his side of the story and saying, no, we wanted to sing. We even they ended up getting signed by Clive Davis and his record company, Arista. And it was known, they knew that the group was lip syncing, but they wasn't going to say anything about it because they was making money. And Rob and Fab, they really wanted to sing. So they reached out to Clive Davis, said they wanted to sing on the next album. Clive said no. They was going to people on their team saying, we want to sing. They said no. They ended up winning the Grammy for Best New Artist and everything. But it got to the point where they went to Frank, their producer, and said, look, if you don't let us sing, which is what we really want to do, we're going to come out and tell the public that you're making us lip sync. And what Frank did, he said, oh, you're not going to blackmail me. He decided to just air them out with the interview with the Associated Press and bring out the real people who sang. And he wiped his hands clean of Rob and Fab and gave them to the wolves. And from the interviews that they had in the documentary from when this was happening, the media was really, really crucifying them, saying, how dare you trick children? How do you feel like, you guys are liars, you're manipulators and all this stuff. And they couldn't really speak up or vocalize themselves because of the language barrier. They didn't really have good English and they were just kids. And it took a mental toll on them. Like they said, they was taking heavy drugs to numb themselves from the pain of hiding that secret for all those for that long period of time. And once they got blackballed from Hollywood, Rob went down a downward spiral, ended up living in a crack house, and ultimately killed himself. And the thing that I took the most from this is in the end, Frank, he had no contact with them. He threw them to the wolves, but then had the nerve to come and show up to Rob's funeral and say, I loved him so much. I had so many deep feelings for him. I have a lot of feelings about Frank because the documentary revealed that he had a history of using Black talent, making them lip sync and then ditching them once it was no longer viable. So that's a whole nother lane to go down, using Black creatives for your gain and then dismissing them. But I just want us to think about how our words and our criticisms can really affect people, because the fact that Rob, this kid, not saying it was okay for him to lip sync, but hearing their side of the story, I see their back was up against the wall. They signed a contract. They was forced to, even when they tried to stand up for themselves, they ended up getting the short end of the stick. And with people vilifying them without knowing, the full facts, I always say there's three sides to the story. There's one, there's the other, and then there's the truth. So you may never, ever know the truth, but I don't think that you should ever, use your words or really criticize or critique people, because at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all flawed. We're all going to make mistakes. We're not going to make the mark. And I think that it's okay to give people grace. And even if something doesn't make sense to you, I just think the whole situation, it really made me feel bad, the fact that Rob felt that he had to take his life at the end of all of this.
I hear you. And this, I think it really speaks to the fact that we've evolved so much since the 1980s. When people talk about how, obviously the world we live in today is not perfect. But I feel like stories like this really demonstrate how far we've come. With the days of TikTok, something like this wouldn't happen in the way that it would in the 80s. And fun fact, Glitter, our girl Mariah, starred in this movie, where she was the person who was being lip synced over someone else. That was the same kind of situation of you signed the contract and that is what it is. So she tried to tell us, and that album, people sleep on that album. That Glitter soundtrack was everything.
I still blast Glitter all day, every day. I love me some Glitter. That's my album. Justice for Glitter. I want it to come back in theaters too. Mariah, make it happen, please.
We gonna see. So we are coming down to our final moments of the show. Miss B Lovely, you got anything else you want to say before we pray out?
Give grace and understand that when you're hearing a story from somebody, there are two other parts that you are missing. So you can't form a whole opinion based off of one portion of the story.
Beautiful. Let's bring that quality into prayer. I invite us to take a moment to bring our attention and awareness to our own understanding of God, of spirit, of whatever word we like to use, and to trust and know that we've been brought here in this moment in time by divine appointment, that we live in this moment in history by divine appointment. I'm grateful for those of us who have engaged in the show, knowing anything that needed to be understood and shifted has shifted, and invite each one of us to live this day and all days as the best day ever. And in gratitude, I invite us to close this prayer with whatever word or phrase resonates most. I chose to close by saying, and so it is.
Amen. Well, this has been another wonderful episode of What's Up and Why. Thank you guys for joining us. We love you all. I am Miss Be Lovely.
And I'm Rev Casey Taylor. Have the best day ever.